last year, the cyber premium in the United States went down for the first time ever. The policy count did go up, so that'll give you a little bit. So that'll give you a sense of the pricing change. But it was the first year that we haven't been growing at the rate, the market as a whole hasn't been growing at the rate we expected.
The thing that scared the living daylights out of me is when we had Zane from ProWriters on, a couple months back, and I asked him the question. I said, what's the average cyber claim you see in the country today? And he said, right now, I would say on average, we're seeing them at about $4 million. And immediately I'm like, oh.
Some of the more sophisticated cyber criminals, they will stalk your social media, figure out who your boss is or who the accounts payable person is. They will accurately spoof that person in an email or even their voice in a deep fake to get you to move money away.
Where we all kind of believe that the real warfare that's going to happen in the world, not just in the US, is going to be cyber. It's going to be people taking out the power grids, people taking out infrastructure, internet attacks, and we're seeing it a lot.
Victim of a cyber attack needs, whether they're a small-sized business, a medium-sized business, or even an extra-large one, are technical experts at the point of emergency. And the best cyber insurance companies are going to be able to offer that.
I would be surprised how many of them could even quantify how much it would cost them on a daily, weekly, monthly basis if their systems were down, but they never think about the opportunity cost of missed space or missed promotion, or even looking at it from a peak season standpoint versus a regular time of the year.
All the reinsurance providers, all the capital providers, they were saying, underwriters, do you really understand cyber catastrophes? Do you really understand systemic cyber risks? Everything is interconnected. We're all using Windows machines. We're all using, we've got all the same devices in our pockets. What are the risks of something so big that all the insurance money in the world couldn't pay for it? Do you understand that? And if not, I'm not going to give you the capacity you need to offer insurance to your end clients. We have a ransomware calculator. One thing that our agents and brokers often tell me is that they could give scary stories about ransomware, but when it comes to actually sharing with the client, how much financial impact should I really expect, they're at a loss. And so our ransomware calculator pulls from our data set, looks for like comparisons, and then breaks down a low, medium, and high severity ransomware attack.
If you're not partnered with managed services providers as referral partners for cyber, you're missing the boat, because you can help send people to them that are in your book of business that need help with cybersecurity and IT needs. And they can also refer all of their clients, which many of them have 500, 1,000 clients, to you to place the cyber coverage on, for their clients.
Less than 10% of small businesses in our estimation are buying cyber insurance today. And yet more than 61% of them have been hacked in the last year, according to the Verizon data breach investigations report of earlier this year. Cyber has been designed to be that emergency service. And so in addition to, of course, the income and becoming $1 million producer or a $10 million producer, going from that, it's also the opportunity to solve a problem that we all know exists and to be the person who brought them to the experts they needed in their time of crisis.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the Power Producers Podcast, where we are refining and redefining the sales game. And we have got a great episode coming to you today. I'm saying that with absolute confidence before we ever even start the conversation, because we're going to talk about a lot of the things going on right now in the cyber marketplace. You've heard from our friends at ProWriters a lot because we've got such a great relationship with them. But we don't really ever have anybody from the carrier side over to talk about what they're seeing. And I am joined today by Michael Phillips from CFC, and we actually have a decent amount of business with these guys. So it's good to just put a face with somebody at CFC. And we're just going to talk about what he's seeing right now in cyber, and maybe if it's possible, get predictions of what's to come. I don't know that that's possible to do outside of 30 days in advance, but welcome on, Michael. I'm glad you were able to join us.
Thank you, David. And first time, long time, of course, on the podcast. Really love it. Big fan of the show.
Thank you.
And thank you for the partnership, via ProWriters, a real great partner for CFC as well. I'm not surprised that I might be the first face that CFC is putting in front of you and your audience. CFC is historically one of the major London markets for cyber insurance. And in the last couple of years, we've been building out our American presence. I lead our U.S. cyber practice on the underwriting side. And you're right, I'm happy to go into state of the market and also offer some predictions, but it is an extraordinarily hard and moving target with the rise of cybercrime, with geopolitical fracture causing all sorts of complex offensive cyber operations that impact businesses of every size. And then I really do want to talk about sales enablement too. I mean, just
Sure, absolutely.
empowering producers to bind more business, because I think that's a major problem for the cyber market too.
Well, it's a huge problem for the cyber market, and I definitely, you're 100% right. We do need to get into that. But before we do, what's your backstory, man? How did you end up at CFC? I mean, have you been in insurance your entire career? And if so, what's that journey look like?
Sure. So I'm sorry. I'm gonna apologize to your audience because they probably hear this every time, but didn't plan on insurance. Didn't plan on it. I am a lawyer by background. I was in private practice for 9 years. So your audience should hold their boos until the end. But I was in business law firms, doing disputes, ultimately in insurance and reinsurance, where I started to learn more about the cyber market. And what excited me about it is, of course, the peril was changing all the time. The product was developing and changing all the time. The laws around cyber and privacy were changing, and it was a growth market, and I wanted to build something. And so the second phase of my career was in cyber claims. I was the head of cyber claims at a couple of carriers that I won't name. And then, but ultimately, I wanted to get into what I'll call the business of the business. So the underwriting side, and CFC has always attracted me as an expert in emerging risks and an early innovator in cyber. So we're one of the first, or if not the first, to have our own incident response capability, our own proactive cybersecurity expertise that we couple with all of our policies. And so getting the chance to champion that in the market has been a dream come true for me.
Yeah, CFC, honestly, man, I'm going back a long time now, like early in my career when cyber first started showing up is an option for companies to buy. You guys were like, you were right there. I mean, I feel like CFC, maybe Beasley, and then, Chubb, when you get into the admitted markets, we're in Travelers as well. We're kind of the four horsemen that I would see every time, I would submit something, but you didn't stay that way. Like what I mean is you guys have constantly evolved into where you're at now. And I mean, you write so many different classes of business inside of cyber and professional, and especially some of the technology services stuff that I do. It's nice to see that you can actually go still get coverage for a managed services provider as long as you have the right story to tell and you can back that story up. You guys are on risks for me specifically that I wouldn't be able to place in other places. And you have been for years, yeah, that's the other thing I would say about you. And this is not necessarily me to, just pat you on the back the whole time, but I do feel like you deserve it. You haven't gone out of the marketplace. There's so many people that have been like in and out and taking crazy rate and this, that, and the other. And in some cases you have to, but I just really haven't seen that. I think you guys have kind of been even keel almost the whole time, or at least better than trend in most cases.
No, well, thank you, David. That is kind, and I do think it's accurate. CFC is, I was at Beasley too, so I'm sympathetic to saying we are one of the few places that can arguably say we sold the first cyber policy.
Mm-hmm.
You've probably met every single individual who could say that. I bet you they've either wanted to be in this chair on your show or they're going to be. But since then we have stayed in the market and we've stuck to our knitting around focusing on emerging risk. So today, we have complementary products that focus on either emerging risk or emerging industry. So MSPs, fintechs, artificial intelligence, all areas where we've developed cyber products that have special insuring agreements that are focused on the risks exclusive to that industry. And that's just the latest way in which we're making sure that we are always focused on the emerging.
Yeah. And I mean, talk about it a little bit from the underwriting side, because I feel like that's the other thing is, that has to constantly evolve. I mean, how do you keep up with all of this stuff, knowing that next week it could be a completely different threat that we're all facing? And I mean, let's be honest, man, you hear conspiracy theorists and even people who aren't at this point that are getting to the point where we all kind of believe that the real warfare that's going to happen in the world, not just in the US, is going to be cyber. It's going to be people taking out the power grids, people taking out infrastructure, internet attacks, and we're seeing it a lot. Um, how do you even underwrite this stuff? Kind of what's the philosophy, and how have you seen that adapt from when you started to where you're at now? Because I got to believe the tools are better for you today than they were originally too. I feel like cyber underwriting, when cyber first started becoming a thing, was really kind of the same as investing in the stock market in like the late the early 2000s before the tech bubble busted. You could literally step back. You hear the stories of people who say they could throw a dart at a wall of all the things on the stock exchange ticker and you were still going to probably make money no matter where it was. I feel like everybody just threw pricing out. There wasn't actuarial data to support it. And all of a sudden it's like, ooh, here we are. And EPLI kind of preceded cyber in that same general capacity. I feel like EPLI was the same way. Well, we know we need coverage for it, but we really don't know what the actual probability of claims are. So let's put some policies out there, and we're going to give away the farm, and we're not going to charge very much because we need to get some revenue in. But all of a sudden claims started happening and capacity went away, premiums went up, sublimits started showing up. And cyber was kind of the same way. And I feel like it leveled off a little bit. And now I feel like, even though I hear people telling me the market's soft, it may be soft or softening on a pricing side, but I also feel like part of that is because underwriting, the various companies have gotten their arms more around it. And the reason I know that is because my MSP, who handles everything for Florida risk, coincidentally, also a CFC client, told me last year or the year before, they're finally figuring out what we do. Our application has gone from a page and a half to 12 pages now. And so, it's been interesting just to see that evolution. But I think that that's something that a lot of agents view as a detriment. It just speaking from my trying to look at things through my peer group's eyes.
Sure.
Can't get them to fill out a 12-page application when the reality is that's actually giving your client a better policy for better pricing if you'll go through that exercise. So the answer is not, let's go answer 5 questions so we can get a bindable quote, from people out there that are doing this. Let's really take our clients to the places that understand what they're doing. They're not hammering us with a bunch of exclusions and sublimits, the ones that they rightfully should, but let's make sure they really understand. And honestly, people, they're forcing us to do our job. If their application's 12 questions, it's because you weren't or 12 pages. It's because we weren't asking those questions and giving that information proactively. And now they get the information because it's required.
Yeah, no, David, you hit on so much there that's important. And, CFC was founded in 1999 as Click for Cover. So, we endured a lot of that initial bubble of tech and that extraordinary optimism around how do we make it easy to transact, to trade cyber insurance, to make money while protecting our clients every day. That's always been at the hallmark of our business. And the philosophy, the underwriting philosophy, really hasn't changed since 1999. First of all, of course, we want to be cyber experts. Second, we want to make it easy for brokers and agents to trade. We want this to be, we believe that the problem is there. We believe we've got a great solution. This should be an easy transaction. We want to make it as easy as possible. And then the third is we want to be able to say yes. And so we want to be creative underwriters and resolve, make sure that protection gaps are closed for every industry, not just the most hardened and mature from a risk management perspective. So how do we do that? I mean, you mentioned, 12-page applications, and certainly in the market as a whole, I think it's the right story to tell that, from 2008 to 2016, 17, 18, the applications were much less sophisticated when it comes to what we needed to know about cybersecurity. And then we went through that 2019, 2021, mid 22 bubble where all of a sudden we had a hard market. We were correcting for the gaps in our approach, and we were asking more precise questions about cybersecurity. And so with that comes a more complicated process. But for us at CFC, focused as we are on small and mid-sized business, we continue to look for ways to make that trade easy for agents across the United States. So single question quoting, a digital platform that's easy to use, and yet I would say that expertise on the underwriting side is still there. So how do we do that? Actuarial data. We are handling 3,000 plus claims every year. So the longevity and the credibility that comes from handling that also drives smart underwriting decision making. And then technology. So scanning being at of our portfolio, of your clients from the outside in, to figure out where their vulnerabilities are, what threats they face, and get a sense of their posture helps us underwrite thoughtfully. At the same time, we want to be able to give you a quote in a minute and 25 seconds,
Right.
And that's sort of the needle we thread every day.
I'll tell you, man, there's some interesting tools out there right now. And I had a conversation with the guys at Cybercube. I don't know if you're familiar with Wayman and that crew or not, but it was really interesting to see how they're approaching cyber to help brokers and agents understand more about what they're actually doing and recommending. And I think the thing for me that was validating that I'm doing some of the things right, was they had the ability to show me within a I don't want to say standard deviation, but a relative certainty that a claim would not exceed the limits offered at certain limit levels based on an exact example from one of my clients. And it was, I mean, crazy accurate, to be honest with you, because I want to say we got to the point where it was like a 98.5% certainty that a claim wouldn't go above, and the limits were 10 million. And I actually had written 10 million limits for this client. So it's like, the thing that scared the living daylights out of me is when we had Zane from Pro Writers on, a couple months back, and I asked him the question. I said, what's the average cyber claim you see in the country today? And he said, right now, I would say on average, we're seeing them at about $4 million. And immediately I'm like, oh, and I'm thinking to myself, how many people listening to this? Plus, how many people in our own book of business that we actually got to buy cyber have only bought $1 million policy, because that's where we started quoting, and we didn't do our job and fulfill our duty to offer by actually analyzing the business and understanding what that probability was. So I think that having a tool, and by the way, this is I have no affiliation with Cybercube whatsoever. I'm not getting paid to talk about this. I just think it was really fascinating that there's a tool out there that would make me feel a lot more comfortable about the limits that I'm offering, but also give me a tool at the point of sale to slide across the table and say, look, I know you say you only need $1 million, but if you buy the 4 million, there's literally an 85% probability or whatever it is. And at least we're fulfilling our duty to offer and letting them reject down to whatever they're willing to purchase if they buy anything at all. I hadn't seen a tool that allowed us to do that was not even accurate. I didn't even know it existed. So that was fascinating to me to go through the demo with him and have the conversation about what their product does.
Yeah, I think that they do a great job. And more focused on your audience, I would say, is that you've identified the problem, which is it is extraordinarily hard for an agent or a broker to give that kind of confidence in their advice around what a loss exceedance curve looks like, or how much limit do I really need? And so at CFC, we are also quite keen to give our agents and our brokers the opportunity to make that case persuasively. So two things that we offer in every quote. One is a benchmarking. Businesses in your industry with revenues like yours or in your geography, this is the type of limit that they're buying. Now, that doesn't get you all the way there, but that gets you some framework that can be a sales enablement tool. And then second, again, referring to the claims data that we've built over these years, we have a ransomware calculator. One thing that our agents and brokers often tell me is that they could give scary stories about ransomware, but when it comes to actually sharing with the client, how much financial impact should I really expect, they're at a loss. And so our ransomware calculator pulls from our data set, looks for like comparisons, and then breaks down a low, medium, and high severity ransomware attack, financializes it, and says, hey, this is what it would cost you. This is what you should expect. Do you have that in the bank? Most small and medium-sized businesses do not have that kind of balance sheet managed. the risk of ransomware, and that's where insurance is at its most highest value proposition.
And I think the thing that makes cyber a little bit more unique relative to how claims are handled is that forensic investigation and all of that stuff can really rack up a bill not necessarily in a hurry, because sometimes it takes months for that stuff to unfold. And you don't deal with that on an auto loss very often. You don't really deal with that on a GL loss. Now, I've been through some pretty nasty business income losses on the property side where it's been a couple of years. Like I had one that was a company that was a massive egg laying facility for Eggland's Best that I represented. And they had an issue where I'm not going to go through the whole claim, but it ended up being a situation where they lost an entire laying house of a couple 100,000 chickens that were laying for them. And the problem, not just the fact that they lost those birds, but the problem was bird flu had hit over in the Midwest, but this account was over in the Southeast. And so a lot of the eggs were now coming from them because the people in the Midwest weren't able to sell them. And so the price of eggs skyrocketed. Now, thankfully, this client was very financially sound and they had the ability to weather the storm. And it took about 18 months to settle the claim. But we actually waited for the real market price of what the eggs would have been had they been able to go to market under current conditions. And it was a difference of a claim that was originally offered to be settled at like 725,000 versus settling ultimately at like 2.3 million, I think. And wow. So with cyber specifically, I'm dealing with this. I hesitate to I don't want to get too much into detail, but I have a client right now that had an issue where somebody got into the accounts payable person's Outlook and was able to create fake folders and Outlook rules. And it became an invoice manipulation situation where they thought they were paying their vendor when in reality they were not. They were paying the bad actor. And like it ended up, we thought, we filed the claim and everything seemed like it was harmless. And then we found out maybe not so much. There's more to the story that we found. And I was visiting them recently and just asked, how's everything going on your end? He goes, this forensic company is really digging in to everything that is going on with this. And he said that plus the amount of reporting that you're required to do to the federal government, to the state government, the notice that you have to give employees, all of that stuff really caught me by surprise. This is $100 million a year company. This is not Bob's Tire Shop, down on the corner. So imagine if you're dealing with a middle market company like that, and by all means, this company has infrastructure for tech, very sophisticated. They were surprised by it. Think about that for a second and ask yourself, is the average account in your book of business really understanding how much this stuff would actually cost? Because I believe right now that even if you have $1 million in coverage, that's a Band-Aid. And I think most cyber events is just going to put a company out of business.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we see uninsured small and mid-sized businesses go out of business within months of a cyber attack. There are a number of reports on that, but it is a very common scenario. One way to frame my thinking around what you shared with us, and I'm sorry for any of your clients going through a cyber attack or a loss like that, is what are the costs associated with a cyber attack, and what does cyber insurance cover? And so modern cyber insurance today, I would first analogize it to emergency services. There is no 911 if you've been hacked to recover your computer systems or turn your systems back on or get you back up and running. And even if you do call 911, the possibilities of them, walking you through all of those components, business recovery, chasing the money down, satisfying data privacy laws in every state and federally, that's unlikely. And so modern cyber insurance, the best cyber carriers today, first thing you need to think of them as is that emergency services, the technical experts to get you patched up and get you back up and running, the legal experts to freeze payments that are in transit to the bad guys, or to satisfy those legal obligations that may be in a contract, maybe in one of every state's data breach laws, or maybe a federal regulation. There are both first and third party coverages. So thinking about cyber crime, there's the loss of funds that so many different permutations of what used to be the Nigerian Prince email, but now is extraordinarily sophisticated.
Oh man, it's
ChatGPT,
insane how good they are.
Yeah, it really is. And some of the more sophisticated cyber criminals, they will stalk your social media, figure out who your boss is or who the accounts payable person is. They will accurately spoof that person in an email, or even their voice in a deep fake, to get you to move money away. But what every victim of a cyber attack needs, whether they're a small size business or medium sized business or even an extra large one, are technical experts at the point of emergency. And the best cyber insurance companies are going to be able to offer that, as well as get you through that business income loss component, if there is one, and hopefully faster than the experience that you've had. But that's certainly an area the market as a whole is getting better at.
Yeah, you get so many rabbit holes, man. It's nuts. And I mean, we even had it happen here at the agency where we had I was driving to visit a friend over on the other side of the bay, and I kept having this number show up on my cell phone from Nebraska. And I'm like, I don't really know anybody in Nebraska other than PayPal. Maybe PayPal needs something because there's an issue with my account. And I answer the phone, and the lady says, is this David Carothers? And I said, well, yes, you called my cell phone. She goes, listen, she goes, I just wanted to check and make sure this was legit. I don't mind cashing a $10,000 check for your employee, but I needed your verbal authorization that this check was valid. And I'm like, what employee? She goes, I have one of your employees standing here in front of me. And I said, and what's the check name? What's the name of the company on the check? And she said, Florida Risk Partners. And I was like, that should be red flag number one. I'm glad you're calling. I mean, I'm Florida Risk Partners, and I don't have employees that would be in Nebraska or traveling to Nebraska to cash a check. And it was like just under $10,000. So I imagine there's some threshold that if it's 10,000 or more, it would have been a trigger that signaled something else. And I said, no, you're not authorized to cash the check. It's not legitimate. I said, there's no way. And so she hung up, immediately calls me back. She said, this lady is really upset, and she is not leaving here until I cash this. She said she did the work for you. And I said, ma'am, I'm telling you with absolute certainty, nobody there did work for me. I said, there are two people who can sign my name, me and my CFO, who has a rubber stamp that has my name on it. So if that check has a wet signature, it would be mine, and I would have signed it, which I didn't. If you can tell me it has a rubber stamp of my signature, I have a few questions that I need to ask, and I'll get back to you. Sure enough, there was a rubber stamp of my signature on there. And so I called my CFO and I said, hey, what gives? She goes, I sent the check you asked me to send. And I'm like, I didn't ask you to send a check. Wow. And she said, you did. You sent me an email and I overnighted it. And I even sent you the receipt yesterday. I'm like, I wondered what the receipt was for, but I didn't honestly open it up and look at it. And so she walks me through. She sends me this email. It was 100% impeccable. The only reason that she should have known that it wasn't me saying it is because the person used her name in the salutation, and then at the very end used the name again and said, I'm really counting on you to get this out today to keep me out of trouble, or whatever it was, right? And I'm like, I never would have used your name a second time. You've known me for 10 years. You've never seen me write that. That's the one thing I can tell you that should have tipped you off. What we found was that, and I figured this out on my own, because there no harm, no foul. But what it was, and I tell you this, people, because if you have spouses that want to work from home and you see these internet things where you can make a bunch of money, it's a major red flag. These people were hired. They had a job posting on Indeed for people to do medical transcription or data entry or something like that. And they replied to one of my team members' email inboxes. It immediately deleted the email and forwarded it over to a Gmail account that was something completely unrelated. So this lady really did do work for somebody doing something, but the intent was that they were then going to have my company pay them for work that they did for somebody else when they had already billed the hospital, doctor's practice, whatever, and the bad actors had the money for the work.
Extraordinary. And David, that to me, that just shows the power of stories. And in the cyber market today, what we see are that stories like that, case studies like that, are extraordinarily valuable, both from a risk management perspective to educate small and medium-sized businesses on the risks that they actually face, and second, to break down sales objections on the cyber insurance purchasing side. We hear it all the time from our brokers and agents. Oh, my head of IT says I don't need it. Oh, only giant companies get hacked. The Lockheed Martins of the world that
No,
have
those are the ones you hear about. That's the
right.
deal, because the dollars are so much. I mean, it used to be that the average ransomware attack was something like 25 grand, because the
Yeah.
people knew that a middle-sized company would probably have 25 grand to cover it. And so they would just attack a bunch of them and collect money from a bunch of different places that way. But I'll tell you, one of the things that I've done is I've partnered with my managed services provider, and we'll do a complimentary dark web scan for my clients as part of us doing risk management on the cyber side. And I actually had one of my guys that I'm a good friend, I'm really, really good friends with at this point. I was on a service fee on the account, so I didn't have commission tied to whether or not I sold the policy. I was getting paid to give him my best advice.
Yeah.
But I walked in and I told him, I'm like, this is the year you really need to get cyber, man. You're a real company now. You're doing 20, 25 million a year is what you're projecting in sales this year. And I would hate to see you putting your livelihood at risk. And he's like, I don't need it. I'm a plumber. Nobody's going to attack me. I'm like, listen, you got guys with iPads taking payment information out in the field. What happens if they leave that at Starbucks? What happens if somebody hacks into it on a public Wi-Fi? Not to mention the fact you have personally identifiable information of your employees. You may even have some of the payment information for your clients on file here. And he said, I'm not going to buy it. And I said, listen, I want to make sure you understand, I have nothing to gain by selling you this from a compensation standpoint. For me, you're paying me to give you my best advice, and I am, and you're pushing back, and I'm going to continue to push back because I'm telling you this is what's best for your business. And he's like, listen, I'm not going to argue with you over it. I'm not going to spend, and it was like $5,000 on a $25 million a year company. He's like, I'm not going to spend the extra money. And I'm like, well, I really didn't want to have to do this, but here you go. And out of my folder, I pulled the dark web scan and I said, here's the usernames and passwords to all your banking information. And I
Yeah.
know that they're accurate because the passwords start with your oldest daughter's first name.
Right.
It's like, how much did you say it was? And I said, it's $5,000. How much is it worth to you now? Maybe the price just went up to 10. I was screwing with him.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
at the end of the day, like, we have to, as producers, we have to get creative. And again, for those of you listening to this, if you're not partnered with managed services providers as referral partners for cyber, you're missing the boat, because you can help send people to them that are in your book of business that need help with cybersecurity and IT needs. And they can also refer all of their clients, which many of them have 500, 1,000 clients, to you to place the cyber coverage on, for their clients. And so if you can find those partnerships, we do all kinds of stuff like webinars, lunch and learns, but then also go on tandem sales calls where if it's an account where we feel like there's some cyber risk, I want to have somebody who can actually speak to it and talk to that CTO and get them to say, look, man, this isn't a turf war. We're not trying to take your job. We're actually trying to protect you because you're human and you very well may make a mistake. And at the end of the day, if we have this in place, it's going to help preserve your job and everybody else's and keep the company from going out of business. We want to figure out how to work together and not butt heads.
No, I love that, David. And proactive cyber insurance today is the CTOs, the head of ITs, the CISO's best friend, because it's reducing their operational cost. So at CFC, we combine our cyber policies with a suite of proactive services, threat intelligence, vulnerability scanning, advisories, sort of live hunting for risks that are a little bit even more mature and closer to knocking on the door. And for an IT guy, that's it's a dream come true. It's an easy way to bring down their own operational cost and to get that extra ally defending them on a day-to-day basis. We really think that the opportunity is extraordinary for cyber, and we're really scared it might be a missed one. Last year, the cyber premium in the United States went down for the first time ever. The policy count did go up, so that'll give you a little bit. So that'll give you a sense of the pricing change. But it was the first year that we haven't been growing at the rate, the market as a whole hasn't been growing at the rate we expected. Less than 10% of small businesses in our estimation are buying cyber insurance today. and yet more than 61% of them have been hacked in the last year, according to the Verizon data breach investigations report of earlier this year. And so the problem is there. The opportunity is really endless for your audience as agents, but we do have to get better at the sale. We have to get better at explaining the risk, explaining the solution, and making that $5,000 purchase that, as you were describing it, a no-brainer, which it really is, in just the same way that property is, and health is. Cyber is the same level of risk to everybody.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, number one, because agents don't sell as much cyber as they should, they don't have those stories to tell. Maybe they would be like me and they would only have the ability to tell it about it happening to them if they're as unfortunate. Thankfully, we dodged a bullet on that one. But I think that's number one. Number two, one of the things that I always say at the point of sale when somebody pushes back on me is, listen, if you can't afford the premium, you certainly can't afford the claim. Let's figure out a way that we can structure this to make it make sense for you. The third thing that I think that people need to be thinking about is, we don't have to do full, guaranteed cost insurance I should say guaranteed cost, but first dollar coverage for everything that we do. And I know that cyber policies all have deductibles on them, but what's the real level of that deductible? If you have a client that has the financial strength, and maybe it makes more sense, instead of them taking a $2,500 deductible, to take a $100,000 deductible. In the case of my $100 million company, I gave you the example on, they took a $250,000 deductible on their cyber. Right. But the point being, we've got to make sure people are taking educated risk. It's got to be quantifiable. And so, number one, sell the limit that they need. And if they don't want to spend as much money, look at what they can afford inside of a deductible layer. In the way that my client thought about this, number one, they easily were able to qualify financially to take a $250,000 deductible. But the way they thought about it was, we have nothing right now. I'd been on this client for a decade to buy cyber, and we had a CFO transition, and I just finally got to an ear that would listen. And sure enough, the first flipping year they bought cyber, they bought a $10 million limit and they had a claim. Yeah. So thank God the guy listened. But point being, you can limit your exposure to that $250,000. I'd much rather you lose 250 than lose your business or lose millions. And so if you can quantify that the most you're going to lose is $250,000 on this thing, barring sublimits and other stuff, then you're in a good spot. Go ahead and buy the limit you need. And it's just, I use the example with property all the time. If you own your building free and clear and it's $1 million building and you don't want to buy insurance because a bank's not making you, I might push back a little bit. But at the end of the day, that if you lose that building, it's going to cost you $1 million plus whatever it costs to get everything, all the debris removed and all of the other stuff, the business income associated with it and all of the other things. You're making an educated decision. But if I tell you, I really think you need to buy an umbrella because you have an exposure as a $25 million plumbing company with 65 vehicles on the road, and now you're a target, and you say, David, I don't really think I need to buy the umbrella, I'm going to push back extremely hard because you have no way to quantify what a claim is ultimately going to cost you when it gets into the hands of a plaintiff's attorney.
No, I think that's exactly right. And so when we talk to our clients about cyber risk, we really are in the place of, it's not if, but when, and it's not even when anymore, but how are you going to respond to it? For small and mid-sized businesses at CFC, we do offer a zero deductible for what we call our incident response cost coverage, which is that emergency services piece, because we believe highly in our security experts to get you back up and running as quickly as possible. And because we want clients who are often afraid to pick up the phone and say, I'm scared I've been breached, because they're concerned about the insurance consequence. We want to break down that norm and get them to, early and often call us, and we'll do what we can to be proactive and preventative and keep it from being harmful. But more broadly, I think it's exactly right. We have to get better as a marketplace to quantify what you can absorb and what you can't absorb. And in this day and age, every small business, every mid-sized business, every business is digitizing. Everybody's using computers. And so for a business owner, it's as easy as asking you, what kind of revenue are you going to lose if you have no access to your computer systems for a day, for a week, for multiple weeks? A lot of ransomware events, even if you've brought in the best experts, take weeks to resolve, and that means that your computer systems are locked up, all the data is encrypted day after day after day. Are you still able to generate your revenue? Are you still able to pay your employees, service your clients, receive your goods, or distribute them? And if not, what's your plan to respond?
Yeah, and
So,
the other
yeah.
thing is taking a step further, because I've got a client that's a toy company, a toy manufacturer and distributor. And think about this. What happens to them if this happens going into August, September, when they're fully ready to get ready for fourth quarter push, and they finally got the end cap space in all of the Walmarts in the country, and boom, somebody takes out their automated processing line, and now they can't fulfill the order to Walmart. They lose that end cap space. And guess what? I spent 10 years in retail. They will never get it back. What's the value there? And those are the things that they don't think about. I would be surprised how many of them could even quantify how much it would cost them on a daily, weekly, monthly basis if their systems were down, but they never think about the opportunity cost of missed space or missed promotion, or even looking at it from a peak season standpoint versus a regular time of the year.
No, I think that's exactly right. And for agents and brokers, I'm worried about that analogous missed opportunity. We have a solution for it. Cyber insurance solves for this on both the balance sheet side and on the technical side of technical recovery. And so we can all help our clients better if we can put this solution in front of them, because they've all got this challenge, and they really do, all of our clients.
Agreed. So, how do we solve the producer offering problem? Like, you've given us a bunch of tools. I feel like, and I'm being devil's advocate a little bit here, but I feel like that those tools only happen if they've actually taken an application to get a quote, and maybe a scan was done, and maybe there's some reference to those in the quote as it's presented, or a policy's actually been sold and now those people have access to those services because they're a policy holder. But what about all the people that aren't even taking the time to bring it up?
Yeah, so I think that's exactly right. A brief digression, and then I'm going to come to this, because I think the producer question is the most important question. A couple of years ago, when the market turned and we had our first real hard market in cyber insurance, all the reinsurance providers, all the capital providers, they were saying, underwriters, do you really understand cyber catastrophes? Do you really understand systemic cyber risks? Everything is interconnected. We're all using Windows machines. We're all using, we've got all the same devices in our pockets. What are the risks of something so big that all the insurance money in the world couldn't pay for it? Do you understand that? And if not, I'm not going to give you the capacity you need to offer insurance to your end clients. And that's the supply side problem. And I think we've overcome a lot of that. We're better at understanding how ransomware happens, what companies can do to prevent ransomware from destroying their businesses, and how to pick those companies and support the ones that are on a journey to become as resilient as those best risks. But what we're not doing, and I don't say it's just for the producers, it's also the market as a whole, is what we're not doing is being persuasive advocates for the sale. And so I think it does start. We've spent some time on case studies at CFC. We maintain a cyber hub with case studies across industry, across segment. We're very keen to present those, through our partners such as yourselves and providers, to make sure that agents have them and can tell the story. And we want to keep making the trade as easy as possible. So how quickly can we get you a quote? Is it as easy as giving us a URL through say through the ProWriters platform, and then getting a quote that also provides scanning information, benchmarking information, risk quantification information. So that way the storytelling is there. And then the last bit of sales enablement that I really want to put a spotlight on is sort of that conversation starting and objection handling. When I go to my old hometown and I talk to some of my family friends who are the insurance agency of my hometown, they say, look, I'm kind of nervous to even broach the subject because I'm not naturally an IT expert. I'm not, I've been able to tell them stories about property risk or about casualty risk, and I'm very comfortable there. But broaching that subject, I'm not comfortable. And then second, even if I am comfortable, if they tell me that they don't think they have a lot of personal records, or they don't manage payments very closely, or they work with vendors and they think they have no risk, I don't know how to respond to their objections. And so CFC, we do offer sales enablement trainings, and we have conversations to break down those objections and build and offer resources to help with that. But I think we've got to have the conversation. We've got to tell the story. We've got to talk about the problem and the solution that we have, and we have to make it necessary. A lot of our agents tell us they'll get to cyber at the end of the conversation once they've sold the bigger ticket items, or they've talked to their client about what the client perceives to be their biggest risks. Clients know that cyber is their biggest risk, but they're kind of scared to think about it. And so maybe it's just as easy as moving it from the last box of the conversation, or the last agenda item, and making it the first one. Hey, I see you've been digitizing. You guys are online. You built a new website. You have a new retail shop online. What would happen if that went down? How can we help you with that? We've got some suggestions. I think it's as easy as getting those conversations started.
Yeah, and I don't understand why. To me, cyber is maybe second in terms of an uncomfortable conversation to start for a producer to life insurance. Like that's the other one. Nobody wants to talk about life insurance, but at the end of the day, I don't know how that could be any more uncomfortable than to tell the surviving spouse that the business owner had none because you never asked the question, And I mean, obviously that's not why they didn't have it. There's more factors, like they didn't go out and proactively try and buy it either. But at the end of the day, like it goes back to everything I say in, sometimes clients are going to be cynical about it. They're going to come back and say, oh, you're just trying to sell me something more or whatever else. But I've said this several times now. We have a duty to offer. That's what being an agent is. It's our job. Like when I got licensed in the state of Florida, maybe it's not this way in every other state, but it's a duty to offer state. If I don't offer it and they needed it and something happens, I better have E&O limits to make sure that my butt's going to be covered and it's ultimately going to pay out for what happened, because I clearly didn't do my job in that case. That's what we need to explain to clients. Listen, buy it, don't buy it. I still have the duty. That's part of what my job is. It's part of what I'm licensed for. And I have to offer this to you, because if I don't, and you have this event, you're going to have selective amnesia about conversations like this one. And that's why I need it to be documented, signed off on. And even in Florida, I have a friend of mine who had an E&O case brought against their agency, and they had all of the documentation, all the rejection, and the plaintiff still won. And the court came back and said, if you would have had an email from that person saying, I know that I am rejecting what you are, I know that I'm rejecting the coverage that you have told me that I need. I do not wish to purchase the coverage. I fully understand. Like it was something absolutely ridiculous. It used to be that you could just get, my agent has offered me an umbrella, I'm choosing not to buy it, blah, 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 sign off on it, and you're done. No, they want something even more specific now that's initiated by that client, sent via email, and all of that, man. It's nuts.
And I'll just say that is exactly right. And it's important. And the opposite side of that is the opportunity to be a hero for your clients. One thing that I've been really fulfilled by since I joined the cyber insurance market is that once buyers are in and they have the crisis, their view of what they've purchased is typically very positive. Cyber insurance might be the one area of insurance where the claims professionals are very well liked. Many of them are the hero of their local community, or of the industry in which they serve, or of their certainly of their portfolio clients. And it's because cyber has been designed to be that emergency service. And so, in addition to, of course, the income and becoming $1 million producer or a $10 million producer, going from that, it's also the opportunity to solve a problem that we all know exists, and to be the person who brought them to the experts they needed in their time of crisis. And so, that opportunity coupled with the risk. I mean, how do you not offer it when we all have computers on our desks? Those are both very compelling to me.
100%. And I think the other thing is, and I've been on this kick the last couple of weeks, so everybody who listens to the show will have now heard it probably 5 to 7 episodes in a row. but it goes back to making sure we're the best version of ourselves for our clients and our prospects. And continuing education that's mandated by the state or mandated by a designation is one thing, but it should not stop there. You know, you guys have resources that will help producers sell cyber. I know that Zane has built ProWriters University on their platform to educate producers and help them sell cyber. There has never been a time that I've wanted Zane. He's actually going to be on the webinar, the boot camp we're doing on the 25th of September, where he'll come on and talk for an hour about here's what we're seeing in the marketplace. Here's what we can do to help you. These are the things you should be doing as a producer, saying as a producer, and all of that. But we got to want to go out and actually initiate getting this information, ingesting it, digesting it, and then executing on it at the point of sale. And I think so many times, you know, we're so caught up in the sale of the product and understanding the intricacies of the product itself that the introduction of the conversation is really more about the potential or perceived problem that the company faces. And you don't have to know everything about insurance to ask that. You're just asking questions to uncover the real potential risk that's there, and let the experts help you frame your conversation when it's time to go back and present the insurance piece. You should never be presenting insurance in the first meeting. You're on a fact-finding mission.
Right. I think that's right. And we do hear from agents who say, "Look, I've been selling property my whole life, but I'm not an expert in cyber wordings." And you know what? Frankly, most of those agents haven't been reading the property wordings lately either. They just know in their hearts what the risk is, and they know how to tell the story. And it's exactly the same with cyber. David, I think you've got that exactly right.
So where can an agent go to get some of the proactive stuff that you guys have out there right now?
Sure. So we are offering agents and brokers across the country a free, what we're calling our cyber session. We tailor it to every inquiry. It is a brief introduction to any area of cyber expertise that you're interested in. So maybe it is sales enablement. Maybe it is, hey, I serve this industry and I'd love to hear more about the risks that they face. Maybe it's how does the claims process work, or what's covered and what's not in a cyber policy. And we're offering that across the country, these cyber sessions. Second, I'll highlight our cyber hub on our website, which of course, we'll make sure it comes across. We routinely publish our case studies, our guide to cyber insurance, our ransomware calculator, and other quantification tools, so that way you can tell that quantified story. But we're very keen to support agencies, brokerages, all through our partners like Florida Risk, of course, and like ProWriters, to make sure they have what they need. Because it really is a problem that we see, and we've got the solution for it, and we've got such an extraordinary opportunity to grow our businesses together.
And I will make sure that we get the address for that Cyber Hub into the notes for the show when we publish it. So before we wrap up, man, anything that we left that we haven't discussed that you wanted to make sure we got out today?
Oh, no. Listen, David, I think this has been a very comprehensive conversation. I really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to hearing Zane get after it in a couple of weeks. But you do a great job.
Thank you.
And I'm a big fan. But anything I can do to help your audience, I hope they won't be shy, because we have built a lot of resource to get them up and running on cyber.
Are you in the city? Is that where your office is?
Yeah, so I'm seated in, we opened our New York office last year. It is downtown on Wall Street, and I'm here every day because my wife doesn't like hearing me scream about insurance in our crumbling Brooklyn apartment.
There you go. Well, I will reach out to you. I'm going to try and get up there sometime in early December. So if I do, maybe we can go grab a cup of coffee or whatever and
catch
I'd love
up that, David. And so likewise, I get down to Florida a bit. I'll make sure we continue our conversation.
Awesome. Sounds good, man. Well, listen, I appreciate your time today. Everybody, this has been Michael Phillips from CFC. I almost said CRC. And you probably know Jared Hopkins and the guys over there too. Also good buddies of mine. Had dinner with them a couple weeks ago, actually. So those are my two go-tos for cyber, CRC or ProWriters, but I have CFC business with both. So it's just good to meet you, man. Really appreciate you taking the time to come on. You were literally the first cyber carrier person who's come on, and I really appreciate it. I got to be transparent, though. I feel like if you've ever been deposed before and they're listening to this, I feel like I was a little bit in a deposition because the old attorney habits were coming out. As I was talking, Michael was taking notes, preparing what his next statement was going to be. And I was in a deposition one time, and the attorney didn't realize I could read upside down and made the mistake of having his notes too close to me. So I was answering the questions he was going to ask me next, and it really messed with him before he did. But no, all in good fun though, man. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. And I'm glad I'm not practicing anymore. Otherwise, you would have walked all over me in the courtroom.
Nah,
but
not at
listen,
all, man.
if you ever need a cyber underwriter on a show, I mean, I'm very keen and, again, a huge fan of all that you do.
All right, man. I really appreciate it. Hope you have a great weekend, and I will catch up with you soon.
Thank you, David.
See ya.
Bye-bye. Bye.